In every archive lies a page that should have burned, and in every silence of history, a voice that refused to die. Beneath the dust of half-erased reports and the hum of decaying film reels, there are stories, scratched out, redacted, but never forgotten by those who buried them. These are not tales of glory or victory, but of experiments conducted in shadows, sealed in vaults, where time itself seemed to hold its breath. When the world counted its dead, others counted what could still be hidden. Across frozen seas, in mountains that swallowed entire battalions, and within bunkers no map dares to mark, men built machines meant to outlast their makers. They whispered in code names and burned their orders, but still left echoes, signals, radiation, fragments of impossible steel. Tonight, those echoes return, pulled from the silence they were meant to keep. And what they reveal is not the end of war, but the beginning of something colder. Chapter 1. Operation Eclipse and the Vanishing Convoy. In the final days of the Third Reich, the Baltic Sea was a theatre of desperation. By late April 1945, German command had issued a general order to evacuate remaining personnel, scientists, and high-value assets from northern ports before they could fall into Allied or Soviet hands. Lübeck Harbour, battered but functional, became a focal point of this exodus. Amid the chaos, a convoy designated Convoy Morgenstern departed under the cover of night, led by the fleet tender Greif and 2 auxiliary ships whose registry numbers were later removed from naval records. British intercept operators at Bletchley Park picked up brief but unusual Enigma-encrypted traffic that referenced the convoy. The messages contained terminology inconsistent with standard naval procedure, including references to secured biological archives and phase eclipse. The decrypts were marked with a high-level classification and rerouted to MI6 for assessment. Within 24 hours, the signals ceased entirely. The British Admiralty ordered Task Unit 24-3, operating out of Scapa Flow, to establish aerial and submarine reconnaissance of the Lübeck-Kiel corridor. On April 30th, a Royal Air Force Coastal Command Liberator spotted oil slicks roughly 40 kilometers east of Fehmarn Island. No wreckage was identified, but a faint SOS was picked up by HMS Opportune, reporting engine failure, loss of control, position uncertain. The distress call was traced to the Greif's frequency band, yet the voice transmission did not match the registered captain, Korvettenkapitän Ernst Möller. Instead, the transmission was delivered in clipped, bureaucratic German, devoid of maritime terminology. When Opportune reached the coordinates, there was only silence, and the sea appeared undisturbed. After Germany's surrender, Allied intelligence teams combed through Kriegsmarine records to reconstruct the convoy's purpose. Most files were destroyed or missing. However, in the captured archives of the Oberkommando der Marine, OKM, investigators found partial documentation labeled Project Eclipse. The project involved the transfer of sensitive material from Peenemünde, the research complex responsible for the V2 rocket, to undisclosed locations outside Reich jurisdiction. Among the signatories was a colonel of the SS Technical Branch identified as Dr. Wilhelm Krantz, presumed dead in 1945, but later rumoured to have surfaced in Argentina. One memo mentioned Morgenstern cargo secured, priority Theta. The notation Theta appeared in no other German naval documentation of the era. In 1952, an MI6 diver named Harold Tennant, attached to the joint Anglo-Norwegian recovery operation Deep Rest, retrieved a section of metallic plating from the Baltic seabed near the presumed convoy route. The plate bore stamped serials consistent with experimental pressure holes developed at the keel, shipyards under Kriegsmarine Contract 22B41. Traces of uranium dioxide residue were found within its seams. The sample was sealed, labelled Eclipse Restricted, and never publicly released. Tennant's field report noted the discovery of what appeared to be chained containers embedded in the silt, but his second dive was cancelled following the sudden appearance of a Soviet patrol vessel in the vicinity. Moscow filed an official complaint to the British Foreign Office 2 days later, accusing London of violating maritime boundaries. A declassified fragment from the Ministry of Defence, dated 1974, refers to a meeting between Admiral Henry Broome and SIS Deputy Director Alastair Crawford. The subject line read, Eclipse Recovery, Baltic Operation Outcome. The memorandum summarised the discussion as follows: no conclusive recovery of material, continued monitoring warranted, Soviet activity in area persistent, recommend full compartmentalisation. A handwritten annotation on the margin reads, File 6A, transfer to Cabinet Office, 1982. File 6A has since vanished. From all National Archives, eyewitness. Accounts collected after the war by local fishermen. From Fehmarn tell of a convoy of ghosts. On nights when fog blanketed the sea, they claimed to hear distant engines and see dim lights beneath the surface, as if ships were moving silently below. Though dismissed as folklore, sonar operators in the 1980s occasionally recorded anomalous readings in the area, metallic masses inconsistent with known wrecks. In 1996, a Swedish geological survey drone captured low-resolution images of rectangular structures roughly 30 meters below the seabed, appearing to have been deliberately buried. The Soviet counterpart to the story appears in a 1963 KGB maritime report, discovered in the post-Soviet archives of the FSB. Codenamed Operation Tucha, Cloud, it described Western salvage activity targeting German underwater containers containing advanced energetic compounds. The Soviets claimed to have recovered fragments of high-grade aluminum alloy, with impurities indicating pre-nuclear experimentation. The report's appendix listed Item 7, sealed canister, unopenable, emitting minor radiological trace. Its present location is unknown, though Russian naval researchers have confirmed that the original Tucha documents were genuine. In 2008, an independent maritime historian, Dr. Anselm Vogel of Kiel University, submitted a classified access request to view remaining Eclipse documentation. His request was denied under the UK's Official Secrets Act. In a private letter to a colleague, later leaked to the press, Vogel wrote, "The British are protecting something not German in origin. Eclipse may have involved an exchange, not an escape." He suggested that the convoy might have carried diplomatic passengers or scientific personnel intended for transfer to Allied custody in exchange for amnesty. This aligns with unverified testimonies claiming that Western intelligence made clandestine arrangements with certain SS research branches. During the war's final weeks, archival inconsistencies further complicate the picture. The Greif does not appear in official Kriegsmarine sinking lists. Its last confirmed location, according to the German Naval Registry, was Departed Lübeck, destination unknown, 28th of April 1945. No crew manifests survive. When British occupation authorities questioned former dock workers from Lübeck, they described seeing cargo loaded onto trucks marked with an unfamiliar sigil, a sunburst pattern enclosing a black triangle, unconnected to any known Nazi department insignia. By 2015, advances in subsurface imaging prompted renewed Baltic expeditions. A Finnish-Russian joint survey reported a large magnetic anomaly east of Fehmarn, roughly corresponding to the coordinates from Tennant's 1952 dive. The anomaly was buried beneath a meter of sediment, resembling a vessel of mid-20th century construction. The discovery made brief headlines, but was quickly dismissed by defense ministries citing unreliable sensor calibration. However, leaked sonar charts suggest a vessel approximately 75 meters long, consistent with the Greif's dimensions. Subsequent expeditions were cancelled following unexplained interference with navigation systems in the region. The true fate of Convoy Morgenstern remains buried under layers of secrecy. Some historians propose that the convoy was destroyed by Soviet submarines, though no corresponding kill claims exist. Others suggest that Eclipse represented a joint operation between German and Allied intelligence, intended to secure assets before Soviet capture. The absence of any survivor accounts is remarkable given the thousands of documented maritime evacuations during the war's end. Only one mention of the word Eclipse appears outside official archives. A post-war letter from a former SS signals officer recovered from a Munich attic in 1978. It reads simply, "Eclipse sailed west not to flee, but to deliver." Whether the vanished convoy carried stolen gold, scientific prototypes, or human passengers erased from history, no definitive answer has emerged. The waters east of Fehmarn remain off-limits to commercial salvage, officially due to unexploded ordnance risk. Yet within intelligence circles, Eclipse has come to signify something broader, a reminder that even in the war's dying hours, not every ship sailed for surrender. Some sailed for silence, and the sea kept its promise. Chapter 2. The Silent War. Beneath Lake Toplitz. Hidden in the Austrian Alps, Lake Toplitz lies encased by steep cliffs and black pine forests that blot out the sun for most of the day. Its waters, deceptively still, conceal layers of silt and saltwater so dense that no oxygen survives beyond 20 meters. Beneath that layer, life stops, and for decades, so did truth. During the final phase of World War II, the SS designated Toplitz as a controlled test site for Waffenprüfungskommission 11, the Experimental Weapons Division. Reports confirmed the detonation of prototype depth charges and the disposal of counterfeit British pounds from Operation Bernhard, the largest counterfeiting scheme in modern history. But other cargo was dumped there as well, sealed crates under guard of men in black field uniforms with no visible insignia, all recorded under Project Seeschlange, or Sea Serpent. After the war, Allied investigators catalogued the remnants of Nazi experimentation across Austria. Toplitz was marked low priority, believed to contain little more than currency printing presses. In 1959, however, Austrian divers from the Federal Gendarmerie discovered metallic fragments far deeper than expected, beyond the limits of standard diving gear. Their report, archived under reference FGA 59 or 13, described cylindrical containers built with non-corrosive material, riveted and sealed. 2 divers died attempting to reach the bottom. The official cause was listed as oxygen deprivation. One survivor, Sergeant Erich Hutter, claimed the containers emitted a constant humming noise, like a generator beneath water. He was dismissed as hallucinating due to nitrogen narcosis, yet his written statement remains on record. In 1963, Operation Remnant was launched by the US Office of Naval Intelligence in cooperation with British SIS. The stated purpose was environmental research, though internal memoranda, declassified only in 2001, reveal the mission's true intent: to recover evidence of acoustic weapons and propulsion studies conducted by the SS technical branch between 1944 to 45. The Americans deployed sonar buoys and remotely operated vehicles, a novelty for the time. What they recorded changed the nature of their inquiry. At a depth of 90 meters, the sonar detected symmetrical objects arranged in a grid pattern, suggesting deliberate placement. Audio logs captured recurring low-frequency pulses, patterns resembling coded intervals, repeating every 22 seconds. The recordings were transmitted to the US National Defense Laboratory and immediately classified. Under Project Delta Echo. Local witnesses recall the presence of unmarked trucks arriving in Kamer Am, a Terci during the operation. Supplies and sealed crates were loaded nightly. Villagers noted that the trucks bore US military markings crudely painted over with black tar. Within 3 weeks, all operations ceased without explanation. The US Embassy in Vienna denied any involvement, claiming academic research conducted independently. Yet, Austrian government files note a payment, authorization to ONI Vienna Liaison Office, signed 6 May 1963, when Austrian police attempted to resume dives later that year. The lake was abruptly declared a restricted zone under the guise of preventing ecological contamination. Throughout the Cold War, Soviet intelligence remained aware of Allied activities around Toplitz. A 1972 GRU report titled O0, Tani, Lake of Shadows, mentioned recovered debris consistent with ultrasonic resonance experiments. The Soviets claimed that Nazi engineers under SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler had experimented with propulsion systems based on cavitation, creating vapor bubbles to reduce water friction for high-speed torpedoes. If successful, such technology could have altered submarine warfare permanently. Western intelligence dismissed the notion as exaggerated, yet classified US Navy documents from 1950 reference a German hydrodynamic experiment, yielding unusual acoustic signatures. These documents make explicit mention of sample analysis pending from Austrian source. In 1984, a diving expedition sponsored by Der Spiegel attempted to verify the existence of the buried containers. Divers equipped with advanced gear managed to reach 70 meters before encountering sudden equipment failure. Cameras malfunctioned, pressure gauges flickered, and an unexplainable magnetic interference rendered compasses useless. The team surfaced with one intact photograph showing a cylindrical structure coated in algae and silt, its sides marked with faint stenciling. WPRK 11B. The photograph was confiscated by Austrian authorities, and the expedition was fined for unauthorized exploration. One diver, Klaus Meindl, later claimed in a private interview that before surfacing, he had seen a steel lattice, like a frame holding several capsules together. He died in a car accident 3 weeks later. interest resurfaced after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. In 1994, a fragmentary KGB document surfaced among the Moscow archives, labeled Tucha 1947. It referred to an unidentified energy-emitting device recovered from Austrian Lake, transferred to Saratov Institute for examination. No records exist of any such institute experiment, but witnesses in Russia's scientific community recall a sealed metallic sphere being displayed under heavy guard during the early 1950s. A former physicist, Anatoly Lebedev, later stated that the object pulsed at regular intervals, as if alive, though he refused further elaboration. In 2002, a German documentary team obtained permission for limited sonar mapping of Toplitz. Their scans confirmed several large anomalies beneath the sediment, but authorities again halted the project under the pretext of protecting historical integrity. Unofficial. Footage leaked from the team's archive shows 3 faint outlines resembling containers aligned on a metal framework, stretching 30 meters along the lakebed. One of the divers on the expedition claimed to have heard rhythmic sounds through his headset. A faint thudding, too regular to be natural. Audio engineers who reviewed the tape described the sound as identical in frequency to the ONI's 1963 Delta Echo recording, which remains classified. The persistence of secrecy around Toplitz has fueled speculation ranging from the plausible to the absurd. Yet archival evidence points to at least one grounded reality. The SS conducted advanced underwater weapons experiments there in 1944, under the supervision of WPRK-11B. This unit's research was distinct from the Peenemünde missile program and focused instead on underwater delivery systems. Surviving correspondence from Kamler's office references energy resonance guidance for autonomous torpedo control. The implications were decades ahead of their time, resembling the acoustic homing systems later perfected by the US Navy. If Project Seeschlange truly involved such experiments, the sealed containers at the lake's bottom may contain incomplete prototypes or data cores resistant to destruction. Austrian authorities maintain that no hazardous material lies beneath the lake, yet their continued restrictions and periodic patrols by Bundesheer units contradict the claim. Satellite images from 2010 show temporary pontoon structures erected on Toplitz's southern edge, later dismantled without announcement. Locals reported military helicopters hovering over the water at night, their lights dimmed. No official statement has ever confirmed what lies beneath the still surface of Lake Toplitz. Every generation that probes its depths seems to uncover just enough to ensure renewed secrecy. The water remains layered with salt and silence, a natural vault immune to time and oxygen. What began as an SS weapons test site has evolved into one of post-war Europe's most enduring enigmas. Whether the hum that divers claim to hear is the echo of machinery long dead, or something still operating beneath the silt, no one knows. But the files marked Seeschlange were stamped with one instruction, repeated in red ink on every surviving page. Do not retrieve, do not destroy, containment absolute. Chapter 3. Red. Silence. The Prague Cipher Files. In August 1968, as Warsaw Pact tanks rolled into Prague to crush the liberal reform movement known as the Prague Spring, a NATO signals analyst named Major Thomas R. Keane sat in a listening post at Bad Aibling, West Germany. His team monitored Soviet radio traffic streaming across Czechoslovakia's airspace, searching for command signatures and field encryption keys. What Keane found instead were bursts of shortwave static, carrying pre-war German cipher formats, the same sequence structures used by the Enigma machines of the Third Reich. At first it seemed like an anomaly, a ghost in the static, but the transmission pattern repeated every 48 hours, and the prefix R13 Prague appeared in the metadata, a designation used in 1944 for a counterintelligence branch of the Abwehr. NATO codenamed the incident Red Silence. The first clue to its origin lay in Prague's Ministry of Interior archives, raided by Soviet troops that same week. In the confusion, a Czech archivist named Dr. Miroslav Havel smuggled a briefcase filled with decaying documents to his apartment on Nerudova Street. Among them were water-damaged pages bearing the stamp Project Morgenröte. Project Dawn. The files referenced encoded transmissions between 1944 and early 1945 from an Abwehr network still active after the fall of Berlin. These networks were designed to shift allegiance to the highest bidder when Germany collapsed. The Soviets seized most of these papers, but not before a handful reached the West through Czech dissidents. When Major Keen cross-referenced the frequencies from the 1968 broadcasts with wartime Enigma logs, they matched exactly. Someone, somewhere in occupied Prague, was using an extinct Nazi codebook to transmit to East Berlin. NATO's Special Communications Branch launched Operation Gossamer to investigate. MI6 analyst Rachel Merton, stationed in Bonn, received fragments of the intercepted data. Her analysis indicated modern key extensions appended to the vintage Cipher, post-war modifications likely added by Soviet cryptographers. She noted something disturbing. The Soviet codes were not replacements but continuations. In other words, the transmissions from Prague were part of a living system, a signal lineage that had survived 2 decades. One decrypted string read, "Archive Dawn operational, directives to Treptow secured, signal continuity ensured." The reference to Treptow, an East Berlin district known for its massive Soviet war memorial, suggested underground infrastructure beneath Soviet military administration buildings. Attempts to physically locate the transmission source met with frustration. CIA station records from Vienna mention a joint American-British field insertion into Prague in September 1968, conducted under the cover of Red Cross logistics. Their mission objective, listed as signal node recovery, targeted a suspected transmission bunker near Vyšehrad. The team vanished within 48 hours. Officially, they were captured and repatriated following diplomatic negotiation. Unofficially, they never resurfaced. A month later, Soviet engineers flooded the suspected area with concrete and expanded the metro line above it. Recovered fragments of the Prague Cipher files, now housed at NATO headquarters under classification. Eyes only, ultra-red, paint a partial picture of what Project Dawn entailed. It appears to have been an Abwehr contingency plan to preserve code infrastructure in case of national collapse. The surviving German engineers and cryptologists were instructed to transfer keys to Eastern safe custody. The language implies an intentional handoff to the Soviets, perhaps as bargaining leverage in exchange for protection or integration into new intelligence structures. If true, this means that portions of Nazi signal architecture were absorbed into early KGB systems during the late 1940s, forming part of the foundation for the Soviet Union's Fialka encryption program. In 1971, British cryptographers examining old GCHQ microfilms stumbled upon an annotation that reignited interest in the Prague files. It read simply, "Red silence protocols persist. Channel open via Dawn 13. The note was unsigned, but written in the same ink and hand as a senior analyst who had died a decade earlier. A search of Cold War monitoring archives confirmed that frequency R13 type Prague was still occasionally active, transmitting bursts no longer than 3 seconds, too short to decode. The signal source moved between Prague, Dresden, and occasionally East Berlin, as though being relayed through surviving WWII-era field stations buried beneath the post-war infrastructure. In 1989, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Western teams entered former Stasi facilities in Treptow. Beneath one abandoned communications building, they discovered a sealed concrete vault lined with rusted cable conduits. Inside was a corroded steel cabinet containing magnetic reels dated 1967-1969. The labeling system was consistent with Soviet signal archives, yet the reels bore serials in old Wehrmacht typography. When digitized, the recordings revealed bursts of encrypted tone signals, repeating in 5-second loops. The sequences matched 1944 Enigma Group 3 traffic, specifically transmissions from Abwehrstelle Prague, a German intelligence outpost destroyed during the city's uprising. Embedded in the final reel was a modern Soviet control header identifying the file as Operational Channel Rassvet, Russian for dawn. From 1991 onward, independent cryptographers attempted to decode the preserved transmissions. A linguist at the University of Utrecht, Dr. Karel Bremer, managed to reconstruct partial plaintext. Silence holds until dawn returns. The phrase echoed one found in the smuggled wartime files. Bremer theorized that the message was not operational but ceremonial, a continuity code meant to confirm that the same network, or its descendants, remained alive. The repetition across decades indicated that both Nazi and Soviet cryptographers had perpetuated the same code lineage without interruption. as if maintaining a hidden fraternity of signalmen across changing regimes. When the Czech government opened limited sections of the Interior Ministry archives in 2004, journalists uncovered a sealed dossier marked CSR, Red Silence, 1958 Sucks. It contained photographs of an underground chamber filled with obsolete radio equipment. The captions identified it as Bunker 13A beneath Troja District, disused since 1945. In 1958, technicians sent to dismantle it reported hearing a signal faintly repeating through dead circuits, despite the absence of external power. Soviet overseers ordered the site permanently sealed. No one has since successfully located Bunker 13A. However, satellite imaging of Prague's substructure in 2012 identified an uncharted void consistent with an artificial chamber beneath that same district. Czech engineers who reviewed the data claimed it was likely an air pocket from old wartime tunnels. Yet the Ministry of Defense quietly classified the findings. Major Keen's final memorandum, declassified posthumously in 1998, ends with an observation. We are not intercepting history, we are intercepting continuity. He suggested that Red Silence represented more than a technical anomaly. It was an ideological legacy embedded in code, passed from Reich to Kremlin. The machinery may have rusted, but the logic persisted, an encrypted whisper linking the totalitarian systems of two empires. Today, researchers who revisit the Prague Cipher files find their requests consistently delayed or denied under national security interests. The official explanation states that the materials contain obsolete encryption techniques. Yet internal correspondence from NATO's Signal Intelligence Division in 2017 acknowledges that the R13 frequency, believed dormant for half a century, emitted a single transmission on the anniversary of the 1968 invasion. It lasted 2 seconds. Its content remains classified. No modern receiver has replicated the signal since. But among cryptologists who know the history, there is an unspoken superstition that whenever the world tilts again towards silence and surveillance, the old network will wake. In their private circles, they still refer to it by its wartime name, Morgenröte, the dawn that never truly ended. Chapter 4. Shadow Network. The Odessa transmission lines. In the uneasy calm of post-war Europe, the radios never truly fell silent. Across the static-filled bands of the Mediterranean in the late 1940s, Allied intercept operators began to notice faint, recurring bursts, shortwave signals encrypted in the now-defunct SS Cipher format. They were rhythmic, efficient, and unmistakably German. The transmissions originated from somewhere along the Argentinian coast, and were routed through relay points in Spain and Portugal. At first, the British assumed these were remnants of stranded Kriegsmarine submarines refusing surrender. But as the years passed, the signals continued, growing more sophisticated. MI6 codenamed the phenomenon the Odessa transmission lines, borrowing from rumors of a clandestine Nazi escape network known as Odessa, Organisation der ehemaligen SS-Angehörigen. In 1947, under CIA supervision, the US Army Signal Corps initiated Directive Raven 9, a covert monitoring program headquartered in Naples. Dozens of operators logged each intercepted signal, noting consistent call signs, Nachtvogel, Aquila, and Cyros. Analysts determined the traffic followed a fixed schedule synchronized to lunar cycles, possibly as an operational precaution. Curiously, the signal structure employed pulse-width modulation techniques unknown during the war, suggesting post-1945 engineering. A debriefing memo from Major Ellis Carmichael to Langley headquarters described the traffic as the fingerprints of a disciplined communications network, organized, deliberate, and resourced. Raven 9's mission deepened when decrypted content began surfacing from Allied listening posts in Gibraltar. One transmission contained the words, "Transport complete, Rosenfeld is safe, Buenos Aires." Another read, "Deliveries to Lisbon confirmed, awaiting clearance from Line 3. These fragments hinted at an ongoing logistical operation linking South America to Europe, possibly tied to fugitive relocation. Cross-referencing cargo manifests from Buenos Aires and Montevideo revealed ships labeled with innocuous registry names, Santa Lucia. Maria Adler, Nordmeer, all carrying agricultural exports. Yet the recorded weights far exceeded cargo declarations. suggesting concealed compartments. British naval intelligence later confirmed that several of these vessels had wartime histories as Kriegsmarine supply ships repainted and reflagged under neutral registries. In 1949, Raven 9 interceptors recorded an anomaly, a single coded phrase broadcast for 7 consecutive nights, translated to "The Black Sun endures." The phrase matched the motto of the Wewelsburg SS Order Castle, a symbolic center of Heinrich Himmler's ideological circle. The discovery prompted Washington to classify the network as a potential political military continuation cell. That same year, reports emerged of unmarked aircraft landing in Patagonia, unloading metallic crates under armed guard. The Argentine Air Force dismissed the accounts as fabrications of foreign journalists. Nevertheless, declassified U.S. State Department cables show that American attachés in Buenos Aires repeatedly warned of coordinated efforts to sustain European personnel flows through private industrial fronts. By 1952, Raven 9's original leadership had been replaced following a series of unexplained deaths. One officer fell from a hotel balcony in Lisbon. Another drowned near Trieste despite calm weather. Internal memoranda noted possible counterintelligence compromise. Still, the intercepts continued. A technician named Paul Darden managed to triangulate one broadcast's origin to a coastal radio mast near Mar del Plata. When Argentine authorities investigated, the installation was found abandoned, the power lines freshly cut. Buried beneath the mast space, however, they uncovered a watertight container holding German military documents dated 1944-45, stamped Reichssicherheitshauptamt, IVB-4, the department once led by Adolf Eichmann. The discovery linked the Odessa network directly to the logistics of Nazi escape routes. In 1954, the transmissions abruptly ceased following a final message reading, "Raven silent, cargo delivered." 3 weeks later, Israeli operatives captured Eichmann in Argentina. A coincidence, perhaps, though one internal CIA memo remarked, "Raven 9 concluded concurrent with Objective Alpha achieved." Publicly, Raven 9 was disbanded. Privately, the files were sealed under top secret, ultra red. During the 1960s, declassified British records revealed MI6 had independently operated a surveillance branch named Operation Sea Line, focused on tracing offshore accounts connected to former SS officers. Bank records in Madrid and Zurich showed massive cash transfers linked to shell corporations founded within weeks of Germany's surrender. Each company bore maritime references: Nordic Shipping, Atlantic Freight, Marineros Limited, yet owned no vessels. One of the longest-running accounts, belonging to Marineros Limited, continued to receive deposits as late as 1962, years after the last confirmed Odessa activity. Its transfers corresponded almost exactly with dates of known Raven 9 intercept spikes. When the United States Congress formed the Church Committee in 1975 to investigate intelligence overreach, journalists pressed for disclosure of Nazi relocation programs. Most inquiries ended at missing documents or redacted ledgers. However, one fragment surfaced from the archives of the National Security Agency. A handwritten note by a Raven 9 operator dated August 17, 1951. It read, "Signal shifts south again. New tone pattern identical to submarine frequency. They are still moving." The word "they" was never clarified. Rumors persisted that Odessa wasn't merely a network of ex-SS officers, but a logistical skeleton later repurposed by Western intelligence to counter Soviet infiltration. The continuity of its radio lines might have served dual masters, first to aid escapees, later to transport covert assets under deniable cover. In 1980, Argentine historian Pablo Leone obtained partial microfilms of intercepted transmissions stored at Ezeiza Air Force archives. Among the fragments was a curious directive marked Odessa Line 3, Neutralization Order Raven. This suggested that elements within the network had turned against their own watchers. Within a year of Leone's publication, his archives were destroyed in a fire attributed to electrical malfunction. Satellite imagery from 1999 showed remnants of concrete foundations and antenna mounts near Mar del Plata, the same coordinates identified by Darden in 1952. Soil analysis confirmed traces of diesel fuel and metallic debris consistent with radio relay generators. Argentine authorities sealed the site in 2001, designating it a heritage protection zone. No official excavation has taken place. When asked about the transmissions, an anonymous retired naval officer told a reporter, "The signals never stopped. They changed voices. By the early 2000s, the name Raven 9 reappeared briefly in declassified NSA research logs concerning historic foreign signal persistence. Analysts reviewing global radio archives noted that faint, repeating German-coded pulses occasionally resurfaced on the same bands once used by the Odessa network. These bursts were weaker, shorter, almost ceremonial. They often coincided with anniversaries of major wartime events: Hitler's birthday, the fall of Berlin, the Nuremberg verdicts. Some intelligence veterans believed they were memorial signals from surviving affiliates, final nods across time. Others suspected they served as activation markers for hidden accounts, property claims, or intelligence archives still buried under assumed identities. The full Raven 9 dossier remains sealed under indefinite classification. Most of its surviving operators died without public testimony. In 2008, a private foundation attempted to digitize archived intercepts from Gibraltar, but the reels were discovered to have degraded. Only one short segment remains audible, a voice distorted by static, speaking German. Der Adler schläft, aber lebt noch. The eagle sleeps, but it still lives. If the Odessa transmissions were truly the echoes of an organized post-war shadow network, they may represent the longest continuous covert communication in modern history, spanning the fall of two empires and the birth of another. The lines may have gone dark, but within the intelligence community, Raven became a whispered term for any operation too large to end and too old to explain. Chapter 5: The Arctic Vault and Operation Harpoon. In the bleak cold of early 1949, a task force of the United States Navy steamed into the northern Arctic Circle under a veil of absolute secrecy. Officially, it was a cartographic mission to map polar sea lanes for post-war navigation. Internally, its designation read Operation Harpoon, a compartmented reconnaissance program authorized directly by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The force consisted of the destroyer USS Kingman, the icebreaker Edisto, and a contingent of naval intelligence officers assigned from Task Force 68, the same unit that had accompanied Admiral Byrd's 1946 Antarctic expedition, Operation High Jump. Its commander, Captain Lawrence E. Maddox, was a cautious officer whose personal log noted only one cryptic line for the first day of departure. Objective: Franz Josef Land. Site coordinates to follow, classified beyond my clearance. By February 2nd, the convoy reached pack ice at 81° latitude. The weather was severe, communications unstable, and magnetic compasses unreliable. The mission's orders arrived via encrypted teletype from Washington. Proceed to Sector Delta 11. Investigate coordinates supplied by previous survey. Secure and recover any foreign material of interest. Destroy if recovery impossible. Delta 11 lay near Rudolph Island, one of the easternmost islands of Franz Josef Land, territory formerly claimed by the Soviet Union, but effectively unpatrolled in winter. According to a declassified US Navy cryptologic summary, a British meteorological team operating from Spitsbergen had reported a metallic structure embedded in ice, resembling the hull of a submarine bearing German markings. When the Kingman and Edisto anchored off the island, aerial reconnaissance confirmed the sighting. Protruding from the glacial surface was the frozen stern of a U-boat, its hull sheared open, bearing the faded numerals U-530. The Kriegsmarine had officially surrendered U-530 to Argentina in July 1945. Its presence here was therefore impossible. Photographs later suppressed by the Navy's Office of Naval Research show a different identifier. Beneath the ice, an unrecorded variant reading U-530B. The team established a perimeter and began excavation under searchlights and makeshift heaters. Beneath layers of ice and sediment, they uncovered a sealed cargo compartment, reinforced with non-standard plating. Chief Petty Officer Samuel Boyd, a diver from the Kingman, recorded in his field notebook, inside hold, steel canisters chained, Ahnenerbe insignia, one cracked open, powder residue. 2 crates marked Heiliger Archive. Radiation instruments spiked on approach. Samples of the residue were collected and sealed. Within 24 hours, the commanding officer received a radio message from Washington cancelling further excavation. Orders were given to seal the site with demolition charges. All photographic plates, notes, and samples were to be transferred to Wright Field in Ohio for material evaluation. When the charges detonated, the glacier collapsed inward, burying the U-boat and its contents beneath tons of ice. The official report filed to the Department of Defense stated that Operation Harpoon had encountered unidentifiable German debris consistent with meteorological experiments. The classified annex told a different story. It included a section titled Vault Discovery, Sector Delta 11, describing a reinforced bunker-like structure adjoining the submarine wreck, containing metallic containers linked via cable conduit to unknown machinery. One photograph, later leaked in the 1980s, shows a circular aperture carved into ice, surrounded by cables frozen mid-extension. The annex was signed by Commander W.R. Shearer, who disappeared in 1950 while en route to a posting at the Pentagon. Soviet intelligence soon learned of the operation. GRU intercepts from March 1949 record urgent communications between Murmansk and Arkhangelsk naval stations describing American violation of territorial sovereignty, object. Retrieval suspected. The Soviets dispatched an expedition codenamed Operacja Sneg, Operation Snow, to Franz Josef Land, but found only a collapsed ice shelf and traces of explosives. Their final report concluded, US forces attempted removal of technological apparatus of German origin, now inaccessible. A footnote speculated that the equipment related to magneto-hydrodynamic propulsion or directed energy experiments. Both research areas rumoured within the SS Ahnenerbe scientific division. In 1952, a Soviet research vessel, 7019T, operating nearby reported detecting intermittent sonar echoes below the ice, like a hum, low and constant. Western intelligence dismissed the account. Yet a corresponding entry in US Navy archives describes sonar interference during submarine exercises in the same region. Both references were later redacted. Throughout the 1950s, rumors spread among American naval personnel that a cache of non-terrestrial materials had been quietly transferred from the Arctic to military research centers. Wright Field, later renamed Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, maintained sealed vaults labeled Project Harpoon until at least 1973. Former logistics officer Captain Paul Grayson testified privately in 1968 before the Senate Armed Services Committee, stating, "The crates came from somewhere cold. No manifest, no labels, just symbols, runes and double lightning, bolts." His statement was stricken from the record Soviet satellite. Imagery from the 1960s identified a persistent heat anomaly on the eastern edge of Rudolph Island, visible even in polar winter. Western analysts speculated that residual power sources, perhaps from experimental generators, remained active beneath the ice. In 1979, a joint Soviet-Norwegian expedition attempted to locate the anomaly. Their helicopter crashed shortly after departure, killing all on board. The official cause was listed as instrument failure. By the 1990s, with the Cold War over, fragments of the Harpoon file surfaced in declassified US Navy archives. Among them were radiological readings indicating uranium traces and notes describing energy resonance amplifiers within recovered objects. These documents reignited speculation that Nazi scientists working under Kammler's Sonderstab technique had attempted to move advanced prototypes northward as the Reich collapsed, possibly to conceal them from Allied capture. The Arctic offered a perfect vault, remote, frozen and unreachable. In 1998, a Russian geological expedition recorded localized electromagnetic disturbances near Franz Josef Land, consistent with buried metallic structures. The team's report, circulated internally, noted the presence of geometric cavities within the ice strata, symmetrical, rectangular, and aligned with the 1949 US coordinates. 3 years later, satellite telemetry captured transient spikes in the same location, lasting less than a second. Moscow denied any ongoing investigation, but internal correspondence within the Russian Academy of Sciences acknowledged inexplicable phenomena in Zone Delta 11. Today, the coordinates of Operation Harpoon remain classified on both sides. The area has been redrawn on modern nautical charts as Restricted Zone 22B, Ice Survey Only. The official explanation cites glacial instability, though no civilian expeditions have been permitted within 50 kilometers for decades. Attempts to submit Freedom of Information requests in the United States return the same response. No records responsive to your query. What the Americans found, or thought they found beneath the Arctic ice, remains buried under 7 decades of denial. Some historians argue that Operation Harpoon was a Cold War psychological operation, an invention to mask surveillance incursions into Soviet territory. Others insist the operation's secrecy stemmed from something real, something neither side wished to unearth. The surviving photographs show crates, half frozen in blue ice, stamped with the sigil of the Ahnenerbe, a twin-headed eagle overlaid on a rune. The last surviving crewman of the Kingman, interviewed before his death in 1987, described hearing a faint droning beneath the ship's hull during their final night at anchor. It wasn't the wind, he said. It came from below, like the ice was breathing. Whether Operation Harpoon uncovered a buried research outpost, a weapons vault, or merely the phantom residue of Nazi ambition frozen in time, it remains one of the least understood missions of the early Cold War. The Arctic holds its secrets well. Beneath its silent miles of ice, perhaps the past still hums faintly, waiting for another expedition to listen. The past never truly disappears. It just waits for the right frequency to be heard again. Somewhere beneath the waves, behind sealed walls of ice and salt, the relics of lost intentions still hum quietly, their purpose unrevealed, their creators long gone. Each generation uncovers just enough to wonder if they should have looked at all. Maybe war was never meant to end, only to change shape, slipping from open battlefields into hidden laboratories, from the roar of bombs to the silence of containment. The files remain sealed, the coordinates blurred, but every so often a strange signal, a whisper, a pulse reminds us that some shadows never went dark. They only went deeper. Perhaps the question was never what was found, but why it was buried. And perhaps somewhere in that answer, the war still breathes.